for tuning in. So in this video, I'll talk a little bit about my experience as a second-year special education teacher and how I'm enjoying the classroom and the things that I've been learning. So I am a special education teacher this year with fourth grade students, and I have the opportunity to work with students with a variety of intellectual and behavior challenges. And I work with those students in the academic setting to ensure that they're working on grade level goals. And I also work with them one-on-one and small group to make sure that they're working on skill-based goals. And we think about, for math and language arts, what are these students' capabilities and what do they already understand? And what more do they need to learn, or what areas can they strengthen? So my students are students that I did work with last year, so I do know their strengths and weaknesses. And then, of course, things may change over the span of a year. So I'm also learning more about where they currently perform and what areas they need guidance with. So my background is in healthcare. I've worked in healthcare for 16 years. And as I said, this is my second year as a special education teacher. But I think even in the special education role, similar to that of the healthcare role, you're caring for people and you're thinking about how is this person's well-being and what can I do to contribute to a healthy environment for this person and one where they can grow and do well. So some of the skills that I've transferred over from working in healthcare to education is being compassionate and thinking about my students' overarching needs, and also thinking about how my students perform and how I can meet them where they are. So my compassion comes through when I'm putting forth the maximum effort to be patient with my students as they face challenges and to ask them probing questions so that I can guide them through our lessons, and thinking about how I can make my classroom learning experience rigorous and impactful for my students. So on a daily basis, I work with 5 students in one class in small group and 6 students in another class in small group in the general education setting. So that means the 5 students that I work with in one class are in the classroom among 25 other students. So it's approximately 30 students in one classroom setting, but I'm working with my students in an inclusive setting in the classroom environment with them, where my students are not all sitting at the same table, but they are spread out throughout the classroom among students without disabilities. And I'm working with my students, my special education students, on everything related to their classroom goals for math and their classroom goals for language arts and their classroom goals for science and social studies. And then when I pull the students out in small group, we're working on math and language arts goals based on what their special education IEP goals are. And I find it very rewarding. I've had the opportunity to engage with students in grades 1, 3, 4, 5, and 8 as a special education teacher. So engaging with the variety of age groups has taught me so much about younger elementary to upper elementary, as well as middle school. And the way that you communicate with students universally for me has been thinking about how I can establish trust with my students. So that relationship building is crucial, so students feel comfortable with opening up to you, sharing ideas, and even coming to you when they need support or guidance and when they're unclear on something. And then another thing that I think about that worked well in healthcare for me compared to being in special education is knowing when to ask for help myself. So when I first started in healthcare, I worked as an emergency medical technician. So you're learning the parts of the body and what to do when this happens to a specific patient. The same way in the classroom, you're learning what the special education laws are within your state and what it means to have a learning environment that's inclusive for your students, what it means to have a least restrictive learning environment. And then you're thinking about how you can support your students in those environments. So when I started as a special education teacher last year, I shared classroom with a fellow special education teacher who had been in her role a year prior to me, but she'd also spent many years within the classroom as a general education teacher. So she was a wealth of information for me and shared so much insightful information. And then I also had the opportunity to go to my supervisors for help and receive guidance from them. And my supervisors include one of my school's assistant principals, as well as my IEP chair. I also learned and was able to ask for help from my fellow special education teachers. Last year, we had a team of special education teachers that taught in early elementary to middle school, and I interacted with staff members throughout all of those grades that taught special education and had the opportunity to learn so much information from them. And then another key component of being in a work environment and learning is that you're learning from the people that you're working with. So I learned a lot from my patients in healthcare, whether it was me learning more about them as an individual to be able to work towards good like healthcare needs for them, or simply learning about the things that they enjoyed. So I knew if I'm bringing this patient an apple juice and she likes less ice, to put less ice. So now I engage with my students and I learn from them. They'll tell me what they understand that I'm explaining and what they don't understand. So I know how to rephrase things. And I can also learn from my students by looking at their work and their writing samples to see what information are they retaining and what areas do they have opportunities for growth in. So that helps me structure my lesson plans when I'm doing those formative and summative assessments throughout the course of our lessons. I can think about how can I make the lesson plan much more helpful to my group of students because I saw them struggling in this area for the prior lesson. So learning from my students. And as a special education teacher, I've learned so much from general education teachers as well. So again, when I'm in the general education setting, I'm working with my special education students in the general education setting, as well as out of the general education setting in my classroom. So I work with one special education staff member and he came from a different state teaching special education. So it was cool to think about what was happening in his prior state that was beneficial for him as a special ed teacher and how might some of that be beneficial in our current work environment. And I also work with a general education teacher who had been teaching for 3 years last year, and she was a wealth of information about managing students' behaviors and communicating with families. So as a teacher, you're not only learning from the hands-on work that you're doing, but you're learning from your students, fellow teachers, fellow school staff, and even admin. And when I think about fellow school staff that I learned from last year, our school has what's called instructional assistants, and we also have paraprofessionals and intervention staff members. So people within those roles taught me things about using student curriculum to guide learning in the most efficient way, tracking student behavior. So I've just been doing building blocks and taking information from a variety of people to create my style as a special education teacher. And I know that the learning process as a special education teacher will be an ongoing process. As I continue to progress in my school, things could change with regards to the learning environment and how the school's culture is. Things could also change with regards to the state laws and what we have to put into effect and implement. And so it's like a environment that you're in where you're learning as you go and thinking about, am I being efficient? Am I working to my full potential? Am I learning new things? Am I documenting correctly? Am I relying on my support network and being that strong support for the students? And another big part of being in any role, whether you're a teacher, working in healthcare, working in general services, city or state government, no matter what your role is, you have to think about what you're doing to care for yourself amid the busy times of your work environment. So last year, my workload started off where I had 14 students on my caseload, and I was also supporting students. And so I ended the school year with about 22 students that I worked with who were my direct students that I was the case manager for, in addition to students that I supported. This year so far, I have 11 students on my caseload and 5 students that I support. And so throughout the school year, a student can have special education services initiated, and I could have a student added to my bucket at any time. So that's something to be mindful of how my workload could change. So being prepared for those unanticipated changes and just doing what I have to do to get things taken care of. So I hope this video was helpful and that you all have gained more insight about my role as a special education teacher and how I've used skills from my prior work environments to help me in my current work environment, how I'm benefiting from relying on my network and being comfortable with asking for guidance, and just having fun with the process of being that support for students, being in a role of service and enjoying every day. Take care, everyone. I'll see you in the next video.